you take my towering daughter as your wife?
Will you take my towering daughter as your wife? The words cracked across the dusty street of Dry Gulch like a rifle shot in church. The weary widow, Agnes Hale, stood beside her wagon, hands trembling so hard the reins shook. 42 men had already turned their backs. 42 hard, cold refusals. Some laughed outright. Some muttered, "God help the poor fool," under their breath. Some just spat in the dirt and walked away. Agnes dropped to her knees right there in the middle of Main Street, skirt pooling around her like spilled coffee. Tears carved pale rivers through the dust on her cheeks. She sobbed, "I've begged every rancher, every drifter, every man with a heartbeat from here to the territorial line. My Clara, my beautiful, gentle girl. She deserves a home, a family, someone to stand beside her when I'm gone. But they look at her height and treat her like she's something the devil dropped off by mistake." On the wagon seat sat Clara Hale herself, 6'10" of quiet thunder. Shoulders broad as an ox yoke, arms thick with muscle earned from years of doing the work of 3 men. Her hands, big enough to palm a wagon wheel, were folded tight in her lap. A single tear slid slow down one bronze cheek. She didn't wipe it away. She just stared straight ahead, jaw locked, fighting the scream that had been building inside her for 26 years. The widow's voice fell to a broken whisper that somehow carried to every porch and doorway. "We lose the ranch in 28 days. When I'm in the ground, she'll have nothing. No kin, no protection. They'll run her off the land. Or worse." She lifted her face to the merciless sun. "Will someone, please, God in heaven, take my towering daughter as your wife?" Silence swallowed the street. Shopkeepers froze behind their windows. Cowboys on the boardwalk passed a flask grinning, placing bets on who'd be drunk enough to say yes before sundown. Only one man didn't laugh. Jacob Wheeler stood by the mercantile steps, sack of coffee beans slung over one shoulder, reins of his lame buckskin mare looped around his wrist. He'd come to town for supplies, nothing more. He'd planned to be in and out before anyone noticed the limping horse or the hollow look in his eyes that had lived there since Sarah and the baby were buried 4 winters ago. But when Clara finally lifted her gaze and their eyes met across the street, the world tilted sideways. Those weren't the eyes of a freak show. Those were the eyes of a woman who'd been broken 1,000 times, but still refused to lie down and die. Eyes that held the exact same raw, aching loneliness Jacob saw every morning when he shaved over a cracked mirror. The widow crawled forward on her knees, fingers clawing at the dirt. Just one man, just one needs to say yes. Jacob's grip tightened on the burlap sack until his knuckles went white. Every instinct roared at him to turn away. He had his own dead to carry, his own nights filled with screams that weren't really there anymore, his own ranch falling to ruin because some mornings he couldn't even find the strength to open the door. But something in Clara's proud, trembling silence pulled him forward instead of back. He took one step, then another. Dust puffed around his worn boots. "Ma'am," his voice came out rough as creek gravel, "I heard you." Hope and terror flashed across Agnes Hale's weathered face at the same time. Clara went rigid, every muscle locking like a cornered Mustang ready to bolt or fight. Jacob kept walking until he stood beside the wagon wheel, head tilted back to meet Clara's storm cloud eyes. The whole town watched, breath held, waiting for rejection number 43. "My name's Jacob Wheeler," he said, loud enough for the porch loafers to hear. "Got a little spread up near Cottonwood Creek. Lost my wife Sarah and our boy 4 winters back." He swallowed hard enough the sound carried. "I know what it feels like to wake up every morning and wonder why the sun still bothers to rise when your whole world is underground." Agnes reached toward him with shaking hands, but Jacob wasn't speaking to her anymore. He looked straight up at Clara, only Clara. "Miss Hale," he said, voice dropping low and steady, "I'm not standing here because your mama begged. I'm standing here because when you looked at me just now, I saw a woman who knows exactly how heavy lonely can get." He reached into his sack, pulled out the ripest peach he'd traded 3 nails for that morning, and held it high. The fruit looked almost comical in his calloused hand, tiny against the scale of her. "His I ain't rich. My roof leaks when the wind comes from the north. My cattle are thin, and my name in this town ain't worth the spit it takes to say it. But I'm honest. I work hard, and I don't run from things just because they scare other folks." The peach trembled slightly in his grip, not from fear, from the effort of holding her gaze. "So here's my offer, Miss Clara Hale, spoken to you and you alone. Give me 30 days. Let me court you proper, like a woman deserves. Let me prove I see the heart beating inside the woman, not the inches the good Lord gave her. At the end of those 30 days, if you tell me to ride out and never darken your door again, I'll ride. No debt, no hard feelings, no land grabbed under false pretenses." Agnes gasped so loud half the street heard it. Clara stared at the peach like it might bite her. Then, sudden as summer thunder, "Climb up," she said, voice shaking but sure. "If you're serious, get in the wagon. We're 7 miles out. You'll see exactly what you're signing on for before you make promises the desert will laugh at." Jacob didn't hesitate. He looped his mare's reins to the tailgate, tossed his sack into the bed, and hauled himself up beside her. The wagon seat groaned like it might split clean in 2. Their shoulders touched, hers twice the breadth of his, solid and warm and real. Behind them, Dry Gulch erupted in chaos, men shouting, women gasping, the banker's son yelling that Jacob Wheeler had finally lost whatever sense God gave him. Agnes Hale didn't wait for opinions. She scrambled into the back with the agility of a woman half her age, snatched the reins, and snapped them hard. The team lunged forward, wagon wheels kicking up a rooster tail of dust that swallowed the town whole.
Hey, real quick, where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city, your state, your country in the comments. I swear I read every single one, and it still blows my mind how far these stories travel. If this one's already got you choked up, hit that like button and subscribe with the bell on. We've got a long ride ahead, and I don't want you to miss a single mile. For the first 3 miles, nobody spoke. Just the creak of axles, the horses blowing, the wind hissing through sun-bleached grass. Finally, Jacob broke the silence. "How long has your mama been asking?" Clara's answer came flat, rehearsed from too many tellings. 2 months solid. Started with Papa's old partners, men who owed him favors. When they said no, she moved to neighbors, then strangers, then any man wearing boots and a hat. You were number 43, Mr. Wheeler. Jacob, he corrected gently, and I don't give a damn if I was 430. I didn't say yes because I was the last choice. I said yes because for the first time in 4 years, something inside me felt alive, instead of just breathing. She turned then and studied him like he was a mirage that might vanish if she stared too hard. "What do you get out of this?" Suspicion sharp as barbed wire. "A free ox that walks on 2 legs? Bragging rights down at the saloon? The chance to say you tamed the giantess?" His voice went low and dangerous. Don't ever call yourself that again. Why not? It's what I am to them. You're a woman, he said fiercely. A woman who's been punished every day of her life for something she never asked for. And I know that punishment, Clara. I know it bone deep. Then, quiet as confession, he told her about Sarah, about the pregnancy that went wrong, about the doctor laying the choice bare, save the wife or save the child, but not both, about begging Sarah to let them take the baby so she could live, about Sarah refusing, whispering that a mother's job was to give everything, even her last breath, about holding her while the life ran out of her onto the quilt they'd been given as a wedding gift, about the baby, their son, dying 2 hours later, anyway, too big for the world and too small to fight for it. When he finished, his voice was raw, and tears he didn't bother hiding tracked down his own cheeks. The wagon hit a rut. Clara's arm pressed solid against his, warm, alive, strong enough to break him in half, and gentle enough not to. "I'm not asking you to love me," Jacob said quietly. "I'm not even asking you to trust me yet. I'm just asking for 30 days to prove that not every man in this world is a coward, that maybe two people who've had the world kick them bloody can stand up together and kick back." Clara wiped her face with the back of one massive hand. What if some things are too broken to fix? He gave a small, crooked smile. "Then we stay broken together. Still beats bleeding alone." Up front, Agnes Hale was sobbing so hard the reins shook, but her eyes never left the road. She whipped the horses on, praying under her breath that this one man, this one, was the answer God had been holding back for 26 hard years. The sun was bleeding red across the mountains when the wagon rolled into the yard of the Hale Ranch. A tired clapboard house with a porch sagging like an old man's shoulders. A barn leaning hard to the left. Fences down in more places than up. Fields gone half to sage and thistle. But it sat in a green cup of valley, with a creek singing silver through it, and cottonwoods whispering secrets to the wind. Clara stepped down, and Jacob saw her full height for the first time. 6'10" of raw power wrapped in a simple homespun dress that had been let out and pieced so many times it was more patchwork than original. Her braid, thick as a rope, hung down her back to her waist. "This is it," she said, arms folded like armor. "Failing ranch, dying widow, daughter who will never fit through any normal door. Still want your 30 days, Jacob Wheeler?" He looked at the house, the barn, the land stretching gold in the dying light. Then he looked at her, standing there like a warrior queen waiting for the final arrow. "More than I've wanted anything in 4 years." And he meant it with every shattered piece of his heart. Agnes disappeared inside, muttering about supper, leaving them alone in the yard as the first stars pricked the sky. Clara shifted her weight, shrinking into herself the way she'd done since she was 12, and realized the world was terrified of her. She started toward the barn, long legs eating ground, forcing Jacob almost to jog to keep pace. She pushed the doors open one-handed, doors that would have taken Jacob both arms and a running start, and gestured inside. 12 cows left, had 32 before Papa drank himself dead, sold the rest to keep the bank office another season. 3 horses, one blind in one eye, one sway-backed, one meaner than a wolverine with a toothache. Chickens gone wild. Roost in the rafters now. Haven't seen an egg in 6 weeks. The barn smelled of old hay and despair. But Jacob saw possibility. Stalls that could be mucked, tack that could be mended, beams that could be sistered before the first snow. He turned to her. "Clara, what do you want?" She blinked like he'd slapped her. "What?" "Not what your mama needs, not what the bank wants, not what the town thinks you ought to settle for. You! What do you want?" No one had ever asked her that. not once in 26 years. Her mouth opened, closed. When the words finally came, they were barely louder than the creek outside. I want to stop being afraid. Every time I walk into a room, I want to go to town without mothers pulling their children behind their skirts. I want to use these hands, this body for building something instead of just surviving. And I want, her voice cracked like thin ice, I want someone to look at me the way Papa looked at Mama in the old photograph before I was born, before he saw what I was and started drinking to forget. I want to be touched without someone flinching. I want to be wanted, but that's stupid. That's a child's dream for someone built like me. Jacob stepped close enough that he had to crane his neck to hold her gaze, close enough that he could have crushed him without trying. It's not stupid, he said quietly. It's the most human thing in the world.
Slowly, giving her every chance to step back, he reached up and took her hand. Her fingers swallowed his whole, rough and scarred and trembling. For the next 30 days, I'm going to prove you deserve every bit of that and more. And if at the end you still can't believe it, I'll ride away and never bother you again. But right now, I need you to hear this, Clara Hale. He squeezed with all the strength in his busted-up heart. You are not a mistake. You are not a burden. You are not too much. You are extraordinary, and any man too blind to see that is the one who doesn't belong in this world. A sound tore out of her, half sob, half laugh, all pain. Then, Clara Hale, who had never let another living soul see her cry, dropped to her knees in the barn dust and wrapped her arms around Jacob Wheeler like he was the only solid thing left on earth. Great heaving sobs shook her huge frame. 26 years of rejection, of cruel names, of doors literally too small, of men crossing the street, of her own father choosing whiskey over the sight of her. All of it poured out against Jacob's shoulder. He held her, arms barely reaching around her back, but he held her anyway, one hand stroking her braid while she cried herself empty. I'm scared, she whispered against his neck, voice raw. I'm so scared this is a dream, and tomorrow you'll be gone and it'll hurt worse than if you'd never come at all. I'm scared too, he admitted. Scared I'm not enough. Scared I'll say the wrong thing and hurt you worse than all 42 of those cowards combined. But I'm here, Clara, and I'm not leaving. Not for 30 days. Not ever, if you'll let me stay. She pulled back just enough to search his face, thumb brushing a tear from his cheek with impossible gentleness. You're real, she breathed, like discovering gravity. As real as the dirt under our boots. You really want to stay? More than I want my next breath. She stared another heartbeat, looking for the lie, the trick, the moment the joke would be revealed. She found only truth. Painful, terrifying, beautiful truth. Okay, she whispered. 30 days. 30 days. They stayed kneeling in the barn until Agnes called that supper was ready. Beans and cornbread and weak coffee, but it smelled like hope. When they walked to the house, Clara's huge hand swallowed Jacob's completely, and neither of them let go. That night, Jacob slept in the tiny spare room with the leaky roof and the hand-pieced quilt. For the first time in 4 years, he didn't hear Sarah screaming in his dreams. He dreamed instead of storm-gray eyes and a woman strong enough to carry the world, gentle enough to cradle his broken heart. The next morning he woke to the sound of wood splitting like cannon fire. He stepped onto the porch to find Clara swinging a double-bit axe, bringing it down with such controlled fury that entire logs exploded into perfect stove lengths. Sweat soaked her dress. Her braid had come half undone. She'd been at it for hours, judging by the mountain already stacked. Clara,
he called. She froze mid-swing, lowered the axe. Didn't mean to wake you. Figured I'd earn my keep. You don't have to earn anything here, he said gently. This is your home. She looked away, ashamed of the need to prove her worth. They spent the day in the south pasture. Jacob watched in awe as Clara moved among the cattle, speaking low and calm, knowing every cow by name and temperament. When a half-grown steer bogged down in a mud hole, she waded in, wrapped her arms around it, and lifted 400 pounds of bawling beef clean out like it was a sack of feathers. "You're incredible," he said, meaning it with everything in him. She ducked her head, cheeks flushing dark. "Just doing what needs doing." "No, you're doing what no 3 men I know could do without ropes and a team of horses." Something flickered in her eyes. Belief. Maybe the first seed of it. The days slipped into a rhythm that felt like breathing after years underwater. Dawn to dusk they worked side by side, mending what was broken, rebuilding what had fallen. Fences rose straight and strong. The barn stood proud again. The cattle grew sleek. Every night after supper they sat on the porch steps, trading pieces of their stories under star fields so thick it hurt to look at them. On the 14th day they rode into Dry Gulch together for salt and wire and coffee. Clara walked tall beside Jacob, chin high. When the banker's son opened his mouth with something ugly, Jacob stepped forward, voice low and deadly calm. The man shut up and found somewhere else to be. On the 21st day, Jacob's hand slipped on barbed wire. The barb laid his palm open to the bone. Blood poured hot and bright. Before he could swear, Clara was there. She scooped him up, one arm under his knees, one behind his back, and carried him to the house like he was made of dandelion fluff. Sat him on the table, washed the wound with water she'd boiled, stitched it with thread she'd sterilized in whiskey, and wrapped it in clean cloth. All with hands that trembled only slightly. When she finished, she rested her forehead against his, eyes closed. "Thank you," he whispered. Her answer was barely sound. "I think I'm falling in love with you, Jacob Wheeler." His heart tried to hammer its way out of his chest. "Clara Hale," he said, voice shaking. "I fell the first time you reached for that peach and didn't pull away." She kissed him then, bent down, cradled his face in her huge, gentle palms, and kissed him slow and deep and desperate, like she'd been starving for tenderness her entire life. When they broke apart, both were crying. "Marry me," Jacob said against her lips. "Not for the land, not because the bank is breathing down our necks. Marry me because I love you, and I want every sunrise and every storm from here on out to find us side by side." "Yes," she sobbed into his shoulder. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." They married 3 days later in the little white church at the end of Dry Gulch's only real street. Agnes wept in the front pew, half the town crammed in to see if the rumors were true. When the preacher asked if anyone had just cause, the banker's son stood up, mouth already forming the words. Jacob turned. One look, cold steel and 4 years of grief forged into something no man wanted to stand against, and the banker's son sat back down without a sound. "I do," Jacob said, looking up at his bride, who had to stoop so the veil wouldn't catch on the rafters. "I do," Clara said, looking down at her groom with eyes shining like sunrise on water. When they kissed, some folks cheered, some cried, and a few finally understood that love doesn't measure in feet or inches. Love measures in courage and in the willingness to hold on when the rest of the world lets go.
Where are you watching from tonight, friends? Drop it in the comments. Your town, your country, the time on your clock right now. I love seeing this story travel the globe. If it touched even one corner of your heart, hit like, share it with someone who needs reminding that real love sees the soul first. And subscribe with the bell so we can ride these trails together again real soon. Sometimes, the most beautiful love stories are the ones the world swore could never be. See you down the road, partners!